Hello viewers, so welcome to my channel. I'm Hashim Ali Khan. Last video I have explained you about the term allowances and what are the different types of allowances like entertainment allowance and taxable allowance, fully tax-free allowance. The basic things I have explained, and one important allowance, that is entertainment allowance, I have explained in the last video. Now in this video, the remaining allowances I am giving the complete provisions explanation. So after watching these two videos, then definitely you will be in a position to solve the problems on allowances. These are very important from examination point of view. And without understanding, without remembering the provisions, you should not go to solve the problem. Otherwise, every problem will be a peculiar, different. Now, allowances are the fixed monetary benefit given by the employer to the employee for a specific purpose, like entertainment allowance, house rent allowance, children education allowance, lunch allowance, medical allowance, family allowance, marriage allowance. So many different types of allowances are there. So some allowances are fully taxable, like dearness allowance, CCA, medical allowance, lunch allowance, fully taxable. And some allowances, few allowances are there which are fully exempted, but remaining allowances are partly taxable and partly exempted. Now in this video, I am explaining about house rent allowance. One of the most popular allowance given by employer to employees are house rent allowance. This is for meeting the rent of the houses where employees stay. Whether employee is living in a rented house or not, sometimes fixed HRA will be given by the employer. So in that case, how much is exempted and how much is taxable, provisions are given by the Income Tax Act. So according to section 10 subsection 13A and rule 2A, HRA is allowed as exemption. Exemption for HRA is allowed under section 10 subsection 13A rule 2A. So how much is exempted? This allowance is given as exemption if the SSC is staying in a rented house and paying the rent. Specific condition has been given that if an SSC is living in a rented house and paying the rent, then only HRA exemption will be given. If the SSC is living in his own house for which no rent is paid, in that case HRA exemption will not be allowed. Actual HRA received is fully taxable, right? Now for giving exemption, employees are divided into two categories. Employees living in Mumbai, Delhi, Kolkata and Chennai, and second, employees living in other cities. So three conditions, factors are given. The least of the three will be exempted and the remaining is taxable. So watch the video till the end. You will get the complete provision regarding how to give HRA exemption. Remember, the provisions are same for the last assessment year and this assessment year. So if on the board it is given as assessment year 22-23, ignore. For 22-23 and 23-24, the provisions regarding these allowances are same. Now, apart from HRA, children education allowance. Sometimes employer will give children education allowance to the employees. In that case, least of the following two will be allowed as exemption, remaining taxable. Actual allowance received or 100 rupees per month per child for a maximum of 2 children. Children hostel allowance, again least of the following two is allowed as exemption, remaining is taxable. Actual allowance received or 300 per month per child for a maximum of 2 children. Truck driver or air hostess allowance, least of the two, 70% of allowance received or fixed at 10,000 rupees per month, least of these two will be allowed as exemption. Last one, transport allowance for traveling between the residence and the place of work. If the SSC is a normal person, fully taxable. Traveling allowance is fully taxable. If the SSC is an employee, is physically challenged or physically handicapped or blind person, then rupees 3,200 per month. So actual allowance received or 3,200 per month, whichever is least, is allowed as exemption. So apart from these 4-5 allowances, many more allowances I have explained in this video. So if you want the perfect knowledge, watch the video till the end. No changes in the last assessment year and during the current assessment year. The same provisions will apply. Now, house rent allowance, HRA, it is often called. So this is one of the major allowance given by employer to employee. In many practical situations, we come across where the employer will pay HRA, house rent allowance, to the employees. The allowance is given towards the rent of the house. Most of the employees are living in a rented house. So it's a burden on the part of the employee to pay the rent. So in this case, the employer will help the employee in paying the amount of rent called house rent allowance. The employer is not concerned whether the employee is paying the rent or not, or how much rent it is paid. Simply, the employer is giving an allowance for HRA to the employees. Now, according to section 10, subsection 13A and rule 2A, HRA is allowed as exemption. Income Tax Act, under section 10, subsection 13A and rule 2A, it has given that HRA will be exempted to certain amount in certain cases. So we are going to learn what are the provisions, when the HRA exemption will be given, how much it will be given. Now, the conditions for availing the HRA and other provisions are as follows. The first rule is the HRA will be given as exemption only if the assessee is paying the rent for the house in which he is residing. If he is not paying the rent, no HRA exemption will be allowed. First point, very first point. So in the coming problems, you have to see whether assessee is paying the rent or not. If he is paying the rent, then HRA is eligible, allowed. Otherwise, if it is given that he is living in his own house or in a house for which he is not paying any rent, so no HRA exemption is allowed. First rule. Then steps. First, calculate the exempted amount of HRA in working note. In the problem, it will be given how much HRA received and how much rent he has paid. These two items will be given in the problem. So your job is, come to the working note. In working note, calculate how much is the exempted HRA under section 10 subsection 13A. You have to calculate by applying the provisions. I'm going to explain you about the provisions. So after calculating the exempted amount, calculate the unexempted amount. Example, if the HRA received is 10,000, but according to calculations, the exempted HRA is 8,000. So 10,000 actual HRA received, 8,000 is the exempted amount. So deduct 8,000, 2,000 is the unexempted amount or taxable amount. This 2,000 unexempted HRA will be taken under allowances in the computation of income from salary. That is a step. Note, for giving the exemption, employees are divided into two categories. The Income Tax Act has given the provision how to compute the exemption for HRA. The employees are categorized into two. The first, employees living in 4 metropolitan cities of India. That is Mumbai, Delhi, Kolkata and Chennai. These 4 are metropolitan cities. And other towns, employees living in other towns. So first of all, employees living in 4 metros. The employees who are living in Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai and Calcutta. List of the following 3 amount is exempted. Which are the 3? First, actual HRA received. Second, rent paid minus 10% of salary. Third, 50% of salary. So in working note, you have to make the calculations. How much actual HR received? Second, rent paid minus 10% of salary. Third, 50% of salary. Make the calculation and find out which is the least one among these 3. Whichever is least, that is exempted. Remaining will be taxable. This is for those employees who are living in 4 metro. The employees living in other towns, again, the list of the following 3 will be exempted. First one same, actual HRA receipt. Second one same, rent paid minus 10% of salary. Third one, 40% of salary. For metropolitan cities, it is 50% of salary. For other towns, it is 40% of salary. That's all. Only these provisions you have to remember for HRA. Now, first of all, for calculating this exemption amount, you must know what is the meaning of the term salary. Remember, the meaning of salary will change from provision to provision. In the previous video, I have explained you about entertainment allowance, EA, where salary means only basic, nothing else. But here for calculating HRA exemption, salary means basic pay plus DA if it enters for retirement benefit. If in the problem it will be given DA entering for retirement benefit, then DA should also be taken in salary here. Similarly, commission, if it is based on a fixed percentage on turnover, suppose the employer will say to the employee, we will give you 1% commission on your sales. 1% commission on your sales. Whatever sales you achieve on that 1% commission. This is called commission based on percentage of turnover. So three things will be included in salary. Basic pay plus DA if it enters for retirement benefit, plus commission if it is based on fixed percentage on turnover. Suppose if commission is not there, don't take commission. If DA is not given as entering for retirement benefit, don't take DA, only basic. So this is the meaning of the term salary. Now note, in the HRA exemption calculations, if one of the amount comes to 0 or negative, so no exemption will be given. While calculating these three amounts, if it happens that one of the amount will be 0 amount or it may be negative amount, in that case simply you write a note, no exemption will be allowed, actual HRA is fully taxable, completely taxable. Second, house is taken on rental basis. If rent is paid to the landlord but the house is not yet occupied, then exemption cannot be given. Sometimes it will be like that. The SSC has paid the rent to the landlord but not yet occupied the house. The SSC has not occupied the house. In that case, no exemption will be given. Actual HRA received is fully taxable. The SSC should occupy the house. He should live in that house. Then only exemption will be given. Last one. For giving exemption, place of residence and payment of rent are important. And the place of job or employment is not to be considered. Simply, for calculating this exemption, we have to see where the SSC resides, where the SSC lives, not where the SSC is doing the job. So place of work, that we have to take into account for calculating HRA exemption. That's all. These are the complete provisions regarding house rent allowance. In examination, you may get a theory question. Explain the provisions under section 10, subsection 13A for HRA exemption. So whatever I have explained, if you watch the video 2-3 times, all the points you can remember and you can write excellently in examination. Now, uniform allowance. Dress allowance is fully taxable and employee cannot claim any exemption. Sometimes the employer will give dress allowance to the employee. Income Tax Act says complete amount is taxable, no exemption. Children education allowance. Sometimes the children of the employee are taking education in certain schools, etc. For that purpose, the employer is giving a fixed allowance to the employee for meeting children education. That is called children education allowance. Income Tax Act says the list of the following two amounts will be exempted, the remaining amount is taxable. Which are the two amounts? First, actual allowance received. Second, rupees 100 per month per child for a maximum of 2 children. 100 rupees per month means 1200 rupees per annum for one child. Maximum 2 children, 2400. The maximum allowance which can be given for children education allowance is 2400 for 2 children, right? The actual allowance received, the actual allowance may be received for 3 children, 4 children, 5 children, any number of children. But the Income Tax Act says limit is given only for 2 children. Rupees 100 per month per child for a maximum of 2 children. Similarly, children hostel allowance. Sometimes employer will give to the employees children hostel allowance. Again, list of the following two amounts. The first one, actual allowance received. Second one is rupees 300 per month per child for a maximum of 2 children. 300 per month means 3,600 per child per annum. And 3,600 into 2, 7,200 is the maximum allowance which we can get, children hostel allowance for 2 children. Now, truck driver or air hostess allowance, least of the following two is exempted. 70% of the allowance received or rupees 10,000 per month. This is for truck drivers. Then transport allowance. For traveling between the residence and the place of work, if the SSC is normal person, fully taxable. If traveling allowance is given by the employer to the employee for going from residence to the place of work, if the employee is a normal person, it is fully taxable. If the employee is a physically challenged person, physically handicapped person, or a blind person, then up to 3,200 per month is exempted. Last one, for any other allowances, if there is no provision in the Act about the exemption, then it shall be taken as fully taxable. Income Tax Act given so many examples of the allowances. So apart from these examples, if any other allowance is given by the employer to the employee for any specific purpose, Income Tax Act says if you don't find any provision, treat that allowance as fully taxable allowance. That's all. So in these two videos, I have explained you about the meaning of the term allowance, types of allowance, and explanation or provision of allowance regarding entertainment allowance, HRA, education allowance, etc. In the next video, we will start the problems on allowances. So if you're satisfied, give a like to the video, share my channel, give your comments, subscribe my channel if you have not yet subscribed, and buy the super thanks which is given below my video. Inshallah, we'll continue the next problems on allowances in the next video.